Friends, it's Terri Gaines, independent demonstrator with Stampin Up. In this video tutorial, I'm going to share a card created with the Floral Delight Designer Series paper, and the fun fold is called a center slider easel card. It lays flat for your envelope, and the center panel slides up, creates an easel, and you have a decorative stopper for the card. I'm going to give you all the details so you can create this card. And I'm going to be using, as I mentioned, the Floral Delight Designer Series paper. This paper is 12 by 12 in size. You get 2 each of the double-sided prints. There's a beautiful floral design on one side and a background on the other side. And it is so pretty. I'm using this print for the card in the tutorial. When I'm done, I'm going to show you a sample created with this print. You can use any of the prints for your card. So for the card base color, I'm using Garden Green. It coordinates so beautifully with that Designer Series paper. And there are several exclusive Stampin' Up! Colors, which are available in ink pads, cardstock, blends, and a variety of different products. So for the card base, it is 8.5 by 5.5. It is scored at 4 1/4. Now keep in mind that's in half. So if you wanted to, you could meet up the corners and use a bone folder to score it. I'm going to actually use my paper trimmer with the scoring blade. And the scoring blade is the light gray one. So I'm going to mark this at 4 1/4 on the ruler here and score that at 4 1/4. Then it says it's cut at 1 1/4 from the edge to the score line. So to do that, I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to mark at 1 1/4. And the dark gray is the cutting blade. There's a mark right in the center of the cutting blade. Match that up to the score line. And I like to push up. When I push down, I feel I'm going to skew the cardstock, so I feel better pushing up. So I start at the score line and go up. So that cuts that section of the card. We want to do the same thing at 4 1/4. Going to move that to 4 1/4. Mark that at the score line and go up, and that is the cut like that. Now then it says to fold the center panel in half. That's this panel right here. Now cardstock has a grain to it, so I could fold that in half. It's with the grain and use my bone folder to crease it. If you were going against the grain, it does not fold as easy, so you do need to score it. So if you were going to score it, I would fold this panel under, that panel under, so just this panel is visible. Go to my scale here, my ruler, and go at 2 1/8. So this panel is 4 1/4, half of that is 2 1/8. So mark it at 2 1/8. Take the light gray scoring and go ahead and score that. So now that's folded in half or scored in half. So that's the prep work of the card base. So we have that all done. So I'm going to put the cutter away, the paper trimmer. Now what we're going to do, you want to fold all of these, and goodness, I did a previous video and I did not have my bone folder over on the side of the table, and I still forgot to grab it. So let me, let me just use my fingers to do that. So we fold this first, and then the instructions are going to tell us that we're going to adhere this panel to the card base and this panel to the card base, not the center one. How I do that is I fold the entire card in half, get it all lined up, open this up, and then I put my adhesive right on this section. So we're adhering this to the card base. We're adhering this to the card base. You can put your adhesive here or here, it does not matter. But I hold this center panel down so I can line it up against that center panel and against that edge, and it just makes sure that my alignment is good. So I adhere that one down. I'm going to rotate it. Now I'm going to put my adhesive on here. As I mentioned, it does not matter which panel you put the adhesive on. So then I'm going to put that down, and now we've got those adhered. So that is how you get the card base ready. Now the Designer Series paper, for this card I'm putting one piece here, one in the center panel, and one here. And I'm using this print, as I mentioned, And all of those measurements are 4 inches in height. So we have this one at 4 inches and this one at 4 inches. We need 2 that are 1 inch and 1 is here. So I wasn't done with my paper trimmer. I'm going to bring that back out. So what you can do is take your paper and cut a 1 inch. The next panel is going to be 2 3/4 and 1 inch. But when it's placed on here, there's a gap. I don't want to cut and stretch my paper. I want to eliminate those gap pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first decide, do I want my paper? I'm going to put my paper on this way. So I'm going to start with this panel. What I did there is I just rotated it. I want those flowers up versus them being down, and I want the smaller flowers on the bottom portion. I'm going to start with this panel. So I'm going to cut this one first at 1 inch. So if I'm going to cut that, I'm going to personally rotate it upside down and use this 1 inch mark here to cut my paper. So now I've cut that at 1 inch. I'm going to adhere that here. The next piece is going to go down at 2 3/4, and it's actually going to start right here. That is a 1/4 inch spacing. I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch out of my designer series paper. So I still have it upside down. I'm going to move it over a 1/4 of an inch and cut that out. So just for visual purposes, I'm going to just lay it here for you so you see what I'm doing. Now I want to cut a 2 3/4 inch panel. So I want to work with the ruler on this side. So now I'm going to turn it the other direction. So now it's right side up. Mark at 2 3/4, cut that. Okay, so that's this piece right here. Now I have another 1/4 inch space here, so I'm going to mark this on the ruler at 1/4 inch here and cut this. So that's this spacing right here. I know this probably sounds complicated, and it's just my preference. You don't have to do it this way. Now this last one is 1 inch, so I'm going to make sure I'm cutting from this edge. I'm going to go down here. This is where it gets tricky because all of that paper is tucked underneath. I have nothing to hold on to, so just make sure you have it straight. Push up to cut that, and now you have your 1 inch panel there. So by doing that, I have eliminated that kind of like when you look through the window, if this was the window pane, you're removing that section of those flowers. So those are pieces that we don't need, and now we can adhere that. So as I mentioned, it's an option. You don't have to take that extra space out, but I actually prefer that. Now I love gingham print, so it's really hard to cover that piece up, but that's okay. I love this side too. It's the beauty and sometimes the downfall of two-sided paper. You can use the side you like, but when you love both sides, it does make it hard to pick. But I'm going to show you how I did this card. So now this one is going to go in the middle. And as I mentioned, now with those pieces gone, we have eliminated that section there instead of cutting it and stretching the print. I like the look of that better, but it's extra work and it's not required. So now what we want to do is adhere this designer series paper just to this bottom section. We're going to have an 1/8 inch spacing on the sides and the bottom. So how I'm going to do that, I'm going to turn this upside down and put 1 strip of adhesive across the designer series paper and 1 strip on this panel below the score line, but not close to the edge. Then I can look for my equal spacing. I'm lining that up across so it matches the designer series papers and apply the adhesive right here. Now we have our panel is going to stand up like this. Okay, now I'm going to cut the basic white layer. I have 2 on my list of measurements. One of them is 2 3/4 by 4. What I'm going to do is take half of a sheet of the basic white postcard that's already cut to be 8.5 by 5.5. I'm going to cut it at 4. So now it's at 4 and 5.5. If I turn it this way and cut it at 2 3/4, I can get 2 out of that section, one for this card and one for another card. And this can be more of the same card or used for the outside sentiment. So I've got that cut. There is another basic white layer too. I'm not going to cut that one for this card. That would be placed right here for some additional inside sentiments or signing your card. I'm going to mark that optional, and I'm just going to adhere this one to my card. So this is where you can stamp your inside sentiment, and we're going to put our stopper. As I mentioned, this is the card that I'm duplicating, and what we need is to have a stopper. I'm going to use cardstock and the Petal Park punch. So some of my cardstock strips I cut at 1.5 inch sections, and I'm going to punch out just the little flower 2 times. I'm going to punch one out for the decorative image and one for the stopper. And if I just work with this, I can maximize my strip and cut out what I want. With the lemon lolly, I'm going to punch out just the big flower. I want 2 of those. And I work with these upside down, and you can punch those out. I'm only putting the green on one section. And what I did previously, I cut out for a different card, I cut out the countryside corners, and I have this excess. So this is great for cutting the bow out. So what you can do is, we don't need the stem. We're going to actually cut that out. So what you can do is just take this, and what I'm going to do is turn it upside down here. I'm going to take this and punch out just some of those leaves right there. And I don't need the stem, but now I have some greenery for my decorative image. So that's how I got all of these pieces. Now, when you cut out these flowers, there's so much you can do with them. What I'm going to do here, let me also say, I cut this out. I stamped this with a stamp set that's in the annual catalog. It's called Label with Love. I stamped the happy birthday. Enjoy today is a good inside sentiment for a happy birthday card. And I stamped it with the Labeled with Love punch. You can get both of these in a bundle and save 10%. You can buy them individually if you only want the stamp set or you only want the punch. You can also get 3 dies that will cut out this image on their own, or bundle it with the stamp set. So in the bottom of the tutorial and on my PDF, I will list both bundle codes if you're interested in those. So I stamped that and left some white space over here and punched it out. All right, so now we're going to put this piece on. So I'm going to decorate the cover, the front, before I put the stopper on, because it's nice and flush. The stopper has to be put on with a dimensional so it holds the stopper. So to do this, I'm going to put on this sample, I'm going to put everything flat. So I'm going to use my adhesive and put this sentiment down on the bottom. I'm going to place it about here, and I'm going to make this flat and show you the two in comparison. This one has dimensionals. So I'm putting that down. Remember when I rotated the designer series paper, I knew I was going to put a sentiment down here. I'm covering the little flowers and showcasing the 2 larger flowers here. Back to the punch. What you can do is you can cut these petals to make them longer. So you can cut them to go longer. Then you can also take that bone folder that I have on the other side of the table, or you can close the scissors and you can fold those petals over the closed end of a scissors blade or a bone folder, just to shape them like that. Now, when I look at this flower, it looks like I could turn that upside down and get close to a resemblance of this flower. So I did that work ahead of time. I cut those and formed those already. And I did the same thing with the little flowers. So I'm going to replace those. And I mentioned I'm not going to use dimensionals. I'm going to use mini glue dots to attach things, or my double-sided adhesive. So I'm going to start out with the bow. I'm going to put that down first with a mini glue dot. So I'm going to put that down here and place it about here. Then I'm going to take this one, put a mini glue dot on the back, and attach this one. Then I'm going to take one of these, put a mini glue dot on the back, and attach that. And that's going to be my decorative piece. For the embellishments, these have some height to them, but they work out really nice. Tinsel Gems 4-pack. I'm going to take one of these larger, I think they look like a lemon lolly color, and place that on there. So that's my front. Now I've eliminated that thickness here with not putting dimensionals. I'll compare the other one in a moment. But as I mentioned, the stopper needs to be put on with a dimensional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a dimensional on the back of the large flower. I'm going to decide how high I want this to be angled, and that's where I'm going to put my flower. I'm going to put it about there. I'm going to use a mini glue dot to attach this one. And I also forgot my take your pick tool on the other side of the table. Goodness, I need to prepare a little bit better for my tutorials. Put that down, and then I'm going to take the small inside, or small gem for the inside. So that is how I created this center slider easel card. Now I wanted to share, we've got a dimensional there, so we have some thickness, and when you close that, you can see we just have that dimensional for thickness. For this card, I put the tag on, label on with dimensionals, that flower on with dimensionals, and the thickness is quite a bit thicker. This is a hand deliver card, or pay more for postage. This one, if you used a flat embellishment, like a sequence, instead of the embellishment I put on there, you could maybe get it by with regular postage on that. So those are what I created here. Now I do want to show you that I have some optional measurements here for cardstock layers. For this sample, I added another layer of cardstock between the card base and the designer series paper, and that is listed as optional here. And I also put the center one on with cardstock, and that's an optional layer right here. So you have some options to add more color to your project, or leave it with just the card base and the designer series paper. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Take care and happy creating.